Let's call to order the regular meeting of the Committee on Ordinance. The members present are myself. We have Holyoke Media here. Okay. I'm the chair, City Councilor at Large, Rebecca Lisi. We also have the Vice Chair, Juan Anderson Burgos from Ward 6, Linda Bacon from Ward 5, Councilor Murphy from Ward 2, and Libby Hernandez from Ward 4 on the committee. And then we're also joined this evening by Councilors at Large, McGivern and Sullivan. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have items 1 and 2 on the agenda regarding zone changes for 1 Holyoke Community Development Corporation, and we've received letters of recommendation from the planning board. So a motion
as a package.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to take up items numbers 1 and 2 as a package. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? So moved. So then you just give me a second here. I will briefly read these items into the record. So item number 1 is a zone change from BL to DR for 125 Sargeant Street. And we have a letter from the planning board dated December 9th with a recommendation for approval. I'll read those in a second as well. Item number 2 is the zone change petition for 1 Holyoke Development Corporation from BL to DR for 414 Maple Street. And we also have a letter from planning recommending that it be approved. I'm just looking to see if they have any. No, they just said that they voted unanimously to recommend that the Ordinance Committee of the City Council change the zoning map as requested. So it's been approved.
I'll make a motion that both zone change be approved as proposed.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to pass the zone change petitions as proposed from BL to DR. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. So moved. Any opposed? So moved. So I think that that's all set there, Mr. Moriarty. We're excited about that plan and wish you luck moving it forward.
Oh, thanks very much. Merry Christmas to all of you. Hope everything we do in 2021 is as easy as that was. Thanks.
It does have to go before the full City Council, and I believe our full council meeting in January is going to be
5th.
The 5th. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll sign off now. Take care.
Bye. Okay. Item number 3 is a continuation of a public hearing. Motion to take it up off the table and open the public hearing is in order.
Aye.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to open the public hearing on the order that the city adopt the Massachusetts recommended changes to the floodplain ordinances. And we have a letter from the planning board dated December 2nd, recommended that it be accepted. And we have some legal language from Crystal, who is on the call here. Great. So we also have Building Commissioner Damian Cody with us for this item. So I understand from the communication that Crystal sent that it was a bit more complicated than originally anticipated to get the language that we had on the books to, I guess, gel with the amendments that the Massachusetts Floodplain Management Office was suggesting. So I don't know if Crystal or Mr. Cody, either of you want to take us through an overview of what's happening here.
Could we ask Crystal to review it, please?
Yeah,
Sure.
that's fine. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I tried to redline it so that you all could see, and comments and et cetera, so that you can see all the changes that were made. So I mean, it was just a lot of there was a lot of new things. It was a lot of making sure that our language was okay, and if it wasn't okay, we had to pick new language. And then depending on what our city had already adopted, we had some choices to make from what the state was requiring. So just a couple of points to note, and Damien and I have gone through this. So we have notes together. Some of the stylistic things may change. So for instance, normally our purpose and establishment would be at the beginning of our ordinances. So that's in there, but it's going to move to the top. So the numbers will change, and then that'll be followed by the definitions. There were also some additional zone definitions that came from the state that I hadn't originally put in because we had a lot of stuff in our current ordinance about the zones, but at Damien's suggestion, I'll go ahead and add those in. And I think that was, so there's just going to be an additional set of definitions for what zone A means, what zone A130 and zone AE means. You'll see that through some of the ordinance, just to sort of button up our definition section. And then there is a spot in part 812 and 814 where it talks about substantial improvements that we still want permits for that. There seems to be some conflicting language where let's see, the old section 812 says that, however, no special permit shall be required for new construction that is exempt from building permit requirements or for substantial improvements. We obviously want building permits for new construction and substantial improvements. So the language is just unclear. I think there's some missing commas, et cetera. So that'll be buttoned up so that permits are required. And those are the only things that I think are not included on the draft before you. But otherwise, it was just adding in some new language from the state as to an abrogation clause, a liability clause, and obviously the definitions. And then our variance process goes through the BVRS, it goes through the state. We don't do those in-house as far as the floodplain stuff goes. Mm-hmm. And then there will be a notation as to our enforcement, which is just a separate part in our current ordinances. So we just have to make sure that that gets noted in the floodplain ordinance so that they know that we are doing proper enforcement. That was something that came through from the state's request, was that there were certain questions we had to answer as to how we were doing enforcement, what our violations consisted of, et cetera. So otherwise it's all before you. If you have questions about the edits themselves, we're here.
Okay, so what I hear you saying then is that there are not really any substantive amendments that need to happen. It's just a rearrangement in some areas, and then just related to the unnumbered zone A and so on. What's happening there? Can you just reiterate? Zone A 1 through 30.
Zone A, those are going to be added to the definitions. It just clarifies what all those zones mean.
Okay. So they're here before us. They are just not in the definition section presently because we don't have them in our definition sections to begin with.
Correct. So there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 definitions that'll go in, and it explains zone A, zone A130, zone AE, zone AH, zone AO, and it's just, you'll see them noted throughout the ordinance. This will actually explain what they are.
Okay. And then finally, the last piece that you said related to enforcement. And is this the language that we're looking at, or is there something else?
No, we have enforcement language in our ordinances already, so it'll just be a reference to that section.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Okay. Any questions from committee members then?
I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that part of the screen. Go ahead, Councilor Vacan. Sorry to miss you.
Thank you. I just wondered, as a practical matter, when we get through all the cleanup and the technical revisions, is there any impact to any property owners relative to these various definitions in the various zones, or is it pretty much status quo?
I think it's pretty status quo. The only thing they'll need to be cognizant of is that, permits are required for any changes they make, but if you're already in a floodplain, you're already aware of that. None of that's really changed. So I don't think it makes any substantive changes. It more covers the city. And just
With the
clarifies
liability.
things that we've already been doing. And now it's, rather than being something that we know we do, it's now written. But we've had a pretty substantive floodplain ordinance already. This just sort of buttons it up.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from committee members or counselors present? I think a motion to close this public hearing and draft into legal form is in order. If the committee feels that it's appropriate to pass it and send it to the council, I'm open to that as well.
Make a motion, we close the public hearing and we have it put in full legal form and recommend approval to the council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing, draft into legal form, and adopt sending it to the full council. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So moved. So that's a 5-0 vote in favor of approval. Thanks, Crystal, for doing all that redlining for us. Again, I understand that it was a little bit more work than originally anticipated, but it's all here and we appreciate it.
Like to make a motion to take up item number 4 off the table.
Second.
I'm going to see, because I don't see, unless Brendan is supposed to be,
Hector.
we're supposed to have Hector here as well as outside counsel. I did tell them that we'd probably start with the salary orders around 7 o'clock. Based on any conversation that might come up earlier. So if we can hold off on that, maybe we go backwards out of order to item number 9, which was filed by Councilor Bartley, and he's asked that it be withdrawn.
Motion, we take up item 9.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to proceed out of order to item number 9. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Make a
Moved.
motion, we give it leave to withdraw.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to give this item leave to withdraw. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, so moved. So that's another 5-0 vote to withdraw. Yep, and we still have about 15 minutes before I'm expecting Hector and outside counsel to come. So if we may continue out of order to item number 8.
Make
Like
a motion,
to-
we take up item 8.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to take up item number 8. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Item number 8 is related to the hen ordinance. There's a lot of language here, although the order itself was that we, I don't have the language order in front of me. I'm just looking at the, so the order itself was that we entertain the creation of a backyard hen ordinance, and we've gotten very far through previous meetings. I think at the last city council meeting, this committee put before the full city council a version of the hen ordinance that basically required a special permit of the city council, and then based on some discussion in council chambers, there was an interest in seeing whether we could reduce the cost, because the special permit of the city council is both time intensive and resource intensive. And so we wanted to see if we could reduce the cost of that special permit process before the city council. And then we did get a legal opinion from our legal counsel regarding Councilor Bartley's order and the way that we need to advertise for public hearings. And that opinion said that we did not have to advertise with the Republican, and that in effect would bring the cost down significantly for the advertising. And what remained would be $100 permit fee, as well as $100 recording fee. So I'd like to see if we could focus in on the special permit by the city council for the hen ordinance that we moved forward to the city council last time, but if we could formally adopt some language to alter the permit fee, because I think that's the only other thing that we really have some ability to control at this point in time.
If I can, Madam Chair.
Please.
Well, two things. Number one, what came through is not what the committee had recommended and went to the council. So we had a legal form before the city council, I believe 2 meetings ago, where we did have a special permit in there. So what we got in our jacket for this meeting did not have that. So what we've got before us is not, at least I don't believe it's a valid ordinance form, because it's not what we adopted in committee nor sent back from the full city council. The other point I would like to make is, the fact, one of the goals was to try to find a way to make it as cheap as possible. And I think Jeffrey, I believe, went out to 3 publications and really got it where and again, I won't endorse any particular publication, but if you are smart and you shop around, you can get a publication that's going to cost you probably 1/3 of what another publication might cost you, which would dramatically reduce the cost of this special permit process. So I think that would, at least, I know it will not satisfy everybody, but it'll make it more palatable for many.
Yeah.
But again, I think what we've got before us is not really what we should have before us.
So what I have before us, and it just seems incomplete at this point in time. If I go into the jacket and look at item number 8, it's just the zoning amendments that I see presently, and we should have additional legal language that was circulated previously that went before the full city council with the special permit of the city council.
Exactly.
That's what we moved forward, and that's what got sent back here. And I agree with you. I don't see it here. However, I think if we can go back into the folder for ordinance and go to the 1124. Nope, it doesn't have it there. 12.8. 12.8 was all marijuana, so it wouldn't be there either.
Counselor, may I speak?
Yes, please. Under suspension of the rules, since we're out of order, our administrative assistant, Jeffrey Anderson Burgos.
So in the process of scanning and uploading all of the documents that were in the jacket, I uploaded the one that was the zoning language that you see in front of you. While I was organizing all of that, the document that has the legal language was in a different location in the office. I know that was around the time that I had transitioned into the job. I went to scan it today at the city clerk's office to provide it. Unfortunately, the office had closed before I was able to get down there. So I do have that in the office. I just wasn't able to scan it in time for this evening.
Right, and I appreciate that. I do, however, believe that everybody in this committee and the council, since what the language we had in this committee was forwarded to the full council at the I'm sorry, I don't have the date for that particular meeting, but that would be it would have been in
November.
So we have seen it, and I think, again, if we're focusing only on the changes to the cost, and it is a special permit of the city council, but we're making only amendments to the cost, then...
We're not actually making an amendment to the cost. We're just making note that the cost is less than what had been discussed. I mean, there's nothing in the ordinance that says what the cost of the advertising would be.
No,
it's just
you're
that
right.
Jeffrey looked that up and did research. So, I mean, we can't put that in the ordinance.
No, we can't. But what we need to do because all special permits cost $100 to take out an application and start the process. That's something that we can explicitly amend in the ordinance that we're crafting here and say, this permit there shall be no fee attached to taking out this permit. That's something that we need to add as language and amend the last version that we had before us. That is the only thing that we can impact at this point in time. Councilor Bacon, is that your hand up over there, or is that a remnant?
Yes.
Councilor Murphy, can I move on to Councilor Bacon for the moment?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
If he's all set, I no rush.
No, you're fine, Linda. Go ahead.
Okay. So my recollection of our last discussion was around the advertising costs, which I think the amount of somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 to $500 had been mentioned. And that was what my understanding was around the costs. And we had a fair amount of discussion about permit fees, where it would become confusing if we started mixing up and amending fees for one sort of a special permit and another. Right. And so I think we should leave that alone and keep the integrity of the special permit process otherwise intact, since we've found that the advertising rates can be substantially lowered. And as with any special permit, you want to make sure that people that are applying for it are serious and that they're going to be seriously pursuing the endeavor that they're coming before the council for. So I think the way that we had the language last time that had the support of the committee should remain as it was. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to clarify. So the number that was proposed, or part of the discussion, was $400 to $500 for the special permit, and that, I want to just reiterate, is $100 permit fee. And part of the reason why some of us were advocating for this going to the Board of Health was because they were going to charge $20 or $25 as a permit fee, as opposed to the $100 special permit fee that we have with the clerk's office. And there was, as you mentioned, Councilor Bacon, a desire not to muddle the fee and start to create exceptions and exemptions. But that is the only thing that we have to amend. The $200 to $300, so if you will, $100 would be for the permit fee. It was estimated to be $200 to $300 for the advertising, and then there is a $100 recording fee. So once you get the special permit, you have to record it with, I forget if it's like the Register of Deeds or whoever it is, but we have to, all the property owners that get this special permit of the City Council have to record it with the state somewhere. So that's where we get up to a $500 permit process, which is hefty and makes an impact on folks, especially if we're hoping that in some cases this can be a way to enhance food security.
Well, if the advertising cost is being cut from $200 or $300 to under $100, I think we've accomplished the goal of the committee to significantly cut the cost for somebody wanting the special permit. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Councilor Bacon. I thought our goal was to get more information about what the publication cost, that we could try to find ways to reduce the publication cost, because I know I had, my original hope was that we could create our own fee structure, but I believe Attorney Barnes really made a pretty strong case that we shouldn't be creating a different permit process for this than we do for other special permits. I do think the information that we got does create, and if what you're saying, if the other $100 is only after the approval is made, that in effect we've probably gotten the cost to submit a proposal and go through the process to somewhere between $300 and $400, with the potential of, if you get it, that you're going to have potentially another $100. Would you say that?
A recording fee, $100 recording fee.
And then my other question to that, and it goes back just to the whole process again, because I'm still the downtown residents, 6 units or less. I know the person that owns the property. I'm assuming they have to be the one filing the request, even though they might be filing it on behalf of a tenant. Is that correct? Because the tenant doesn't have ownership, and therefore, I would think it has to be the landlord, the owner, that would be processing the application.
I'll defer to Crystal here. I know that we had at least asked for express something in writing expressing that the landlord was working with them, with the applicant in some way if they were not the property owner, but I'll defer to Crystal here.
Okay.
Only because I don't have the language right in front of me, given that it's not in the folder.
No,
Although
I think deferring to Crystal makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Crystal, do you mind helping us out here?
No, so is the question, I just want to be clear, are we talking about whether or not the tenants can go in and do the applications for the coops? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we would want something from the landlord, I would think, that's allowing them to put them up, because, I mean, ultimately, the owner is the one that's going to get fined if something isn't correct. I also don't have the language in front of me. So I can check and see if that's something that is written in. I was pretty sure that we had, verification of a lease or something, some sort of language to that effect in there. So
that's what I remember. I don't remember if it was just written sort of an expression that they are going for this, or if they had to apply for it themselves. Although they would be the holder of the permit in the end. The landowner would be the holder of the permit.
That's where I'm kind of thinking they end up that they would actually be the ones filing it on behalf of the tenant. Now I could be,
Well, I think the tenant, I mean, so yes, I think, formally there needs to be, the landlord needs to be involved. Although it's not like they would have to come into the public hearing if the like true applicant had a letter expressing the landlord's approval. And it would be the landlord's, the property owner's responsibility to file and record the permit if it were granted.
So that would be the same for a 2-family house or a 3-family house where the owner allows someone to do it. And again, it's the owner's property, but they're allowing somebody to do it. So again, my question would be, does the owner file it, or is there something in here that allows us to have a non-owner file for something and get it, and then then the landlord eventually says, no, I don't want you.
They can't get it without the landlord. That I know. It's just, yep. I don't remember if the landlord had to be the applicant themselves, or if the applicant just needed to show evidence that the property owner was aware and involved and okayed the whole situation. I'm just not seeing it. So
yeah, I don't see it either.
Folder here. Oh, you know what? I made a new folder. That's why. I made a new folder for hens. Regulations. So so I'm not seeing it here in the regulations, and so I'm just going to go to the application, because that would be the one last document. Keeping of hens application. So the first question is the applicant the sole owner of the property where the hens will be kept? It's a yes or no question. And then if no, please provide a signed written statement from all property owners granting permission of the keeping of hens. So in the application itself, it has that requirement.
Counselor Lisi?
Counselor Bacon.
So the language would need to specify if the landowner is going to have to pay the filing fee. I don't think we had discussed that previously. I think the only thing we had talked about was the permission, which should also be in the legal language rather than just in the application form, if that's the way we're going with it.
Crystal, can we ask you where to put that sort of language, that the recording fee is going to have to be absorbed, or that the landowner will need to file the recording?
I would assume that we would put that under where the fee is. So, where it tells you that a special permit requires a fee, you could put in that landlord or tenant, I mean, whichever way you want to go. We could put that language right there.
Right. I mean, we don't have to say who needs to pay for it. I mean, they could figure out between themselves who's going to pay for it, but we should note that there will be a $100 recording fee upon completion and approval.
Well, I mean, the special permit requirements are all pinpointed in the language now. It should refer to our special permit ordinance. I think it's section 9.2, 9.1, one of those, but it's in the language. Because
So my point, if I may, was that if we are stipulating otherwise than the applicant paying it, then we would need to put it in the legal language that the property owner would have to pay the filing fee.
I think as long as we get paid, I don't know that we care where the check comes from.
Well, I'm just saying if we want the owner to have to pay it rather than the applicant. Just if we wanted that to be that way. I personally don't care, but if we wanted it to be a certain way, I think we'd have to say it, right?
I think it makes sense to make it explicit that there is a recording fee. Should the application be should the application be approved, then there will be a $100 recording fee.
But it just said that's part of the reg already for the special permit.
Right, but
It just be stating one piece.
Excuse me. I think the breakdown happens where we don't want property owners to get slammed with a $100 recording fee. If they felt like they were just signing off on something that could happen on their property.
Exactly.
I think we want to make sure that people understand that there will be a recording fee, and that the applicant should be prepared to pay it. So whether it's the property owner or the applicant that is a tenant, I think we just need to make it explicit that there will be a recording fee should the application be approved. And I understand, Crystal, that it is in the special permit language that we have already, although usually the special permits are applied only by the property owner. In this case, we're allowing tenants with the property owner's permission. So we just wouldn't want it to come as a surprise.
I'm fine with that. I can find a spot to put that in.
Okay. And then just because it came up, do you have any, I understand the value of not muddling the special permit fees, but could you just revisit that for a moment to see if there is any wiggle room there? Because again, I do think that the process is a bit cost intensive. So if we could sort of eliminate or reduce that initial permit fee, $100 permit fee, that would be a good move forward. Crystal?
Oh, I didn't know if you were asking me. I mean, that's not my decision to make. If the council doesn't want a permit fee for this permit, we would just put that language in there. Otherwise, right now it's referencing our special permit ordinance, which is, $100 or whatever we change it to be.
Right.
it is a bit odd that we would have one permit that doesn't have a fee. You know, it's just difficult for people to keep up with when it's a special permit. I think it's much better to have them cohesive across the board.
Right.
But, you know, it wouldn't be the first time that, you know, something was off in the ordinances. So if we don't want a fee for this one, we would just explicitly state that, and rather than section, you know, referencing section whatever our special permit fees are, we would just put, you know, there's no fee, but you still have to apply for a special permit and go in front of the council, et cetera.
So it's doable if the will is there by the body, is what I hear you saying, and it's not ideal because it does create inconsistencies for, I guess, the clerk's office to have to manage, but it is possible if the will of the body is there. Okay, so
Councilor Bacon has her hand up.
is
Oh,
that
I
a new
thought I put it down.
Oh, oh, I thought you put it up. Sorry.
I meant to take it down.
Thank you.
all right, so I think
Councilor Hernandez has her.
I'd like to wrap up this conversation. It just seems that there's two things outstanding at this point. Number one would be making the recording fee explicit. Not that we want anyone in particular to pay it, but it should be known that there will be a recording fee should the ordinance pass. And then, you know, I'd like to just see if there's the votes there to eliminate the $100 permit fee for this one item.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Hernandez?
Yes, I just wanted to to talk a little bit on the, you know, what I was hearing from Crystal is that there is a way to still keep it as a special permit, but not have to pay the fee. Is that what I heard from our legal?
Yes.
And so what is it that we need to do to arrive at that? Because I think that that's going to be huge in making this affordable for the different people that are going to be interested in trying to have hens in their backyard. Is that something that we can work towards? That they still have to pull the special permit, but not with the fee?
Yeah, it would just require an amendment. We'd have to vote on that language specifically because it wasn't in the previous version. So still having a special permit of the city council, we would take a vote to waive the $100 fee for this particular application. So it would need to be made as a motion, and then we could vote on it.
So can I make a motion to waive the $100 special permit fee for those interested in pursuing having hens in their backyard?
Motion has been made. I'll second it. Motion has been made and seconded to waive the $100 special permit fee. All in favor?
Wait a minute.
Aye.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Under discussion.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead, Councilor Bacon. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you. So my position on this matter is that almost every single small business operating under a special permit in the city right now is hurting. And if we're going to amend special permit fees, then I think we should do it fairly and across the board and not pick and choose certain special permits to waive fees and other special permits to maintain the fees. So I will not be supporting the waiving of one when we have many, many distressed people in the city right now. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the same line. If I were to do anything, I would not have a problem trying to lower the fees across the board, if that was possible. But I think before we ever did that, we certainly would want to know what the real cost of that process is and how we're going to offset that. I think what we've done and when we got the information to a great extent has really made this, I mean, for the most part, most people applying for this, or many people applying for this, are going to be homeowners. And I'm not saying all homeowners have unlimited financial resources. But I do think if we're going to change it for one, then we need to change it for all. I don't think we can just say this one here is a special permit, special permit, as opposed to other special permits. I'm assuming that the work going into it is the same. So if we could lower it and find out what that cost really is and maybe make it a realistic cost, I could potentially go along with that. But I don't think I can go along with just waiving it entirely. I mean, I think we dramatically reduced the cost, potentially down to $300 or $400. And from what I understand, in terms of the cost of doing it, you're talking, you have to have the ability somewhere in the vicinity of between $500 and $800 to really get it started and started well. Now, so I mean, I'm okay that we've got the information to lower the fee. I've gone along with the downtown residential and the 6-family and try to make sure I understand the landlord versus the tenant situation, because I can see that being a conflict somewhere down the line. Hopefully not. But I really think that, keeping it as is, I think for the most part, most people that are going to be in this position, if they really want to do it, it would be an affordable thing. Obviously going by just the fact that whatever the special permit cost is, it's the special permit cost. And we've done everything to try to make it so this is as convenient as possible. So I couldn't waive it. And if we wanted to waive it, then I'd have to have us go back and look at all the special permit costs. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Hernandez.
Yes, but this is not a small business. That's why I thought that it could be something that if the city and legal is saying that it can be done, this is not, the people that are going to be pulling these permits is not a small business. So therefore, it's not like we're treating it differently, although the process, we're making them go through this process, but it's not a small business. This is to actually increase food security so people can keep more money in their pockets, they can eat healthier. And if it's possible to do so, why not do it in good faith and allow the people, not only homeowners, renters as well, because there's renters that are renting a home and that can get the permission and have the hens in their backyard. And if in good faith, if it's a possibility that we can move forward with just waiving that fee, because it's not a small business. These are residents that are going to be, trying to be self-sufficient and bring good foods to their home. Why wouldn't we take the opportunity to do so? So that's why, that's where I stand on it, but I see that it doesn't look like, it's going to fly. Thank you.
Yeah, the only point that I would make is that along the same lines, like these homeowners would not be businesses. The special permits that we have that are only, the city council sort of approval, like the marijuana, for example, they do require a technical review by various city departments, like such as engineering and the planning department, and that's generally why we have that fee set at $100 to cover literally the manpower costs of having multiple departments review the application. Here, it's not even going to be, it's going to be reviewed by the Board of Health, in the fact that that's where people would get the materials from in terms of the regulations and the application, but there's really no review that's happening. It's the city council that's going to do all the work. This is the work that you all have really decided that we have to do as the city council. And so we don't get paid. We get our stipends. That doesn't fluctuate. Whatever the workload is the workload. And if we can waive the permit fee for this item, I think it's appropriate. I really do. I don't think that we have to lower the special permit fees across the board. I think this is the way to sort of compromise having a special permit of the city council instead of the permit of the Board of Health. Again, they were thinking that it would cost them $20 or $25 to administer both the review of the application and the inspections. And so, you know, we're jumping up to, from $20, we're jumping up to possibly $300 or $400. And really, the city council has done nothing to lower the cost. We have just sort of done some research to understand what various newspapers would potentially charge. And so we really haven't done anything to lower the cost from that $400 or $500. It may be less than $400 or $500 depending on where people advertise, but all the other fees are in place, and we haven't moved at all on the cost that we're inflicting upon our residents. Is that a new hand, Councilor Bacon?
Yes, yes, please.
Go ahead.
So I think the issue is that the main point around the special permit was the public hearing process relative to the transparency for the neighbors. And that is what makes the process of a special permit what it is. And so, and I also believe as part of the construction of the coop, there would probably need to be a building inspection of the coop as part of that, along with the Board of Health. But anyway, every special permit has its own unique set of requirements, and so that's just my perspective on it. Thank you.
Well, the motion has been made and seconded to waive the $100 special permit fee. If there's no other discussion, I'll take a vote on the motion that Councilor Hernandez made to waive that $100 special permit fee. Seeing that there's no other discussion, all in favor of waiving the $100 permit fee? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
So that's a 3-2 vote to waive the special permit fee. And then
I didn't hear one's vote.
I
He
said
did.
yes.
Okay. Got to talk louder.
I don't want to blow out your eardrum.
Oh.
I saw his, microphone go unmute. I got it. So 3-2 to waive the $100 special permit fee, and then that would just be added to the, special permit process of the City Council that we reviewed in full council last time, along with the addition of this annotation that there will be a recording fee. So then, on the motion to approve the HEN ordinance with the amendment for the waiver of the $100 permit fee. Is there a motion?
So move.
The motion has been made and seconded.
No, go ahead.
Do you want to talk? I'm sorry, Councilor.
No,
Hernandez.
I just thought that I had to do something that I wasn't doing, so.
Okay. So on the motion to approve the HEN ordinance with the addition of annotation for a recording fee and the waiver of the $100 special permit fee, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oh.
No.
So it passes 3-2 out of committee and will be in front of the full City Council at the beginning of next year. All right, moving on. I do see that we have Hector here as well as outside counsel, so we could move on to the salary orders. They are items 4 through 7 on our agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to take up items 4 through 7.
Motion has been made and seconded to take up items number 4 through 7 on the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. So these are all related to our salary study. So item 4 was filed in 2015 that the section 2-3 Code of Ordinances entitled Classification and Compensation Plans be amended to incorporate a new classification and compensation plan, elected official, salary ordinance, and miscellaneous salary schedule based on the results of the HRS Salary Study. Item 5 is related to filed by Leahy and Roman that the City Council take up and approve a salary study completed in 2014. And then item number 6 is filed by McGivern, that the Schedule B, compensation for elected officials, be taken up and amended. And then item number 7 is filed by McGee, McGivern, and Murphy, as well as Tallman, that hourly wages for reserve officers be raised from its current $95 an hour. Okay, so let me just speak a little bit. In the past week, Hector, Crystal, and I, as well as outside counsel who's on the call here, Russa Dupre, met with HRS to just double check to make sure the methodology that we were using was appropriate. If you recall, Hector had taken on the work of applying a 2% COLA to the ranges that HRS presented to us in 2015. And then apply, again, the 2% COLA over 6 years. And so we asked HRS if that was an appropriate methodology. And what they said was, well, it wouldn't be appropriate to apply that to the data itself, the way that they formulate the ranges. It's okay. It's not necessarily a best practice, but it works effectively. But we would be coming up at the end of the so they recommend that salary studies be completed every 5 to 7 years. So this would really be the last opportunity that we have to use the salary ranges that were presented to us in the 2015 study before we would really need to sort of go out and pay for a new independent study to be done. That was one thing, and then the other thing that we were looking for help with was, I know that Councillor Bacon and others have over the years expressed concerns with the way that the council would or would not have budgetary control over the new ranges. And Russell will be here tonight to present us with some options for how to do that. I'll pass it over to Hector to see if he wants to add anything else in terms of an overview. Oh, Hector did, I think, do some work to populate the elected official salary ordinance as well as the reserve officers.
Correct. Thank you, Councilor Lisi. So before I actually start speaking on the documents, I just want to would like to just confirm if the documents are in the possession of the councilors that are present. I would expect that they are. I recently sent them early, shortly before the meeting.
I do.
On an email?
It's in my email. Elected wage info spreadsheet, as well as
Salary schedule for council.
right. So, councilors, if anyone doesn't have the ability to look at 2 screens at once, we could do a screen share at some point in time. If that
would be helpful, but it would also be helpful to have it sent to us in a PDF format. It's hard to manage these spreadsheets out of the Zoom, the Google Drive and everything, and print them out in a way that's user friendly.
Councilor Lisi?
My house.
Councilor Graney, I didn't see that you were on the call. Yes?
Yeah, I've been here for a while. I was just wondering if we could get hard copy of these things,
Yeah, I'm sure that Jeff can print out hard copies of this and circulate them.
Yeah, it's much easier to read them off a piece of paper than it is off the phone. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So,
Councilor Lisi,
Councilor McGivern.
got the blue hand up, Rebecca.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the spreadsheets, trying to figure out if I could bring them over into the screen here.
Hector, where did you send this information to?
It was actually shortly before tonight's meeting, so it was sent to Rebecca and Jeffrey Anderson Burgos.
All right. Well, that's if I could ask you in the future, could you just send it to all of us, or give it in times that it can be sent to all of us?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes, and I just got it as the meeting began here. So Jeffrey, if you could add the two documents. Oh, it looks like they're here. Is this them? No. So Jeffrey, if you could add these two new documents to the folder for this meeting, that would be great. And we'll do our best to share the information. I don't think we're going to make any final decisions on some of those larger, the numbers themselves. I think what we should do here is focus our time with Russell and you know, explore the policy options that we have to create some budgetary controls. And then I hope we could perhaps finalize the reserve officer salary, and then at the next meeting really be able to, you know, finalize the data points. Does that sound agreeable to everyone here?
Yep.
That we utilize our time with Russell?
Yep.
Counselor Lisi, I agree with that, but I also would like to have the attachments that are referred to in the orders that are on the agenda.
So that's all in the folder as far as I understood.
I looked in there, I couldn't see them, but maybe I just couldn't open it. I don't know.
Yeah, it gets hard to follow.
Yeah,
There
we
are
might,
attachments for boards, attachments for elected officials. I just couldn't find them.
okay. I will work to circulate everything as a complete package to the full city council following this meeting, and anything that Russell offers us that is relevant to circulating things out to the full council. I'll take that on. Yep, thank you. And so motion to suspend the necessary rules and allow outside counsel to address us.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Russell, would you just introduce yourself? I think you're new to the council here.
Yes, I'm Russell Duperret. I work with the Duperret Law Firm. We've been around for, I don't know, 40 years maybe. And my father is was the owner. I'm the owner now as of this year. And we basically specialize just in labor law and school law, and that's all we ever do. So we don't do any other areas of law but those two. So I'm very familiar with these types of salary surveys. Usually most of my clients have used the Collins Center. They probably bid on your RFP is my guess. So I looked at the salary study. We had a conversation with the principal of that firm the other, I don't know, I guess a few days ago. And she kind of walked through some of the data. It is fairly old at this point, but I think it's still relevant data. And basically everybody in the area settled for 2% per year on average over the last 5 or 6 years. So it was actually very standard, in fact. So I represent many of the public employers in Western Mass, and they were almost all settling at that amount. So moving the data forward, I think you probably still have a pretty relevant data set. I think the problem, it's really how you use the information in the scales. So I think preliminarily, when you look at what they provided to you, if it's a hiring range, that would normally mean that you could hire, let's say if the hiring range is between 45,000, 65,000, you would initially hire somebody within that range, but that doesn't mean that they're capped at 65,000 under a normal hiring range. It just means that that's where you start somebody. So I think the first step is you figure out, do you want it to be a hiring range where people can actually move beyond the scale itself at some point? Or are you seeing the range as being a discrete set that once somebody hits that 65 grand, they can't go over it at any point? That would be a little unusual, because what it would do is, let's say you set up something that looks competitive today. If it never changes and everybody else is settling at, let's say, 2% a year, eventually you're no longer competitive again. So most of the time, a hiring range is really meant to just capture where you're bringing new people in, but not capping people out at a certain salary. So that's kind of question number one for the board. You're going to have to make that decision. I think the second question is, how do you set some controls so that everybody doesn't get hired, let's say, at maximum? So one thing I talked about with the smaller group is you could hire new people at no more than the mid-range, and you could place current employees at no more than the maximum range or no more than mid-range, for example. So you could come up with controls as far as where people would be placed, and then normally the movement within it would be based on performance in general. So if you got placed at 50 grand to start, let's say you're making 45 now and the range says you should have been making 50. So you place the person at 50, or you place them at 48, or whatever you decide to do. And then that person would get raises in the future based on how the supervisor feels they're performing each year. That would be typical for non-union employees. So those are a few of the factors I think you need to look at. I would generally set a hiring range so you can hire competitively. And I would also say that you probably should say something along the lines of, with your current employees, you need to figure out, is there a restriction as far as where in the range it can be, or maybe you say no more than X percent. So if somebody's like dramatically below the range, like 10 grand below the range, you might not want to increase the salary 10 grand in 1 year, but maybe you could say, everybody will be moved on to the new scale, but it will be no more than, as long as it's no more than a 5% raise or something, whatever you decide. So there's a whole bunch of ways we could draft the language to put controls about how people are placed and how quickly they can move and those type of things. But kind of the first step is really to figure out, do you agree with the salary schedule or salary scale? Do you think it's reasonable? And then how are you using it? Is it just placement for hire, or is it a cap for everybody that's currently working there?
So I think that the way that HRS presented the document to us was that it would be a salary range. I am open to amending it to create it explicitly as a hiring range, but I think that's something that's up for discussion in this committee. I think we really should have a conversation about these things while we have you here, Russell, so that you can answer questions as we sort of think about what the impacts are. But when I look at the salary study, it was presented to us from HRS as a schedule, a salary schedule of full ranges, as opposed to a hiring range.
Yeah. Now that may be. I mean, let's put it this way: if you do a salary hiring range, it's less likely that it has to be adjusted every 5 years or so. Salary schedule, you're going to need assistance from an outside group probably again. So I don't know. Sometimes things get presented in a way where it's going to create continuing work. It's not necessarily what you want to do with it, but
Councilor Lisi, do you mind if I?
Sure. I don't see any hands from committee members at this time, so yes, Hector.
My mouse is not showing up on my screen here, so I'm glad you can hear me. So I think because there are several of us that have joined the conversation regarding the salary study after the fact, there needs to be some sort of just like a brief, and Russell and I actually spoke earlier today discussing the difference between a salary range and a hiring range. And so I think the intent with the salary study was certainly to address salary ranges, But the issue that Holyoke faces is two things: low salaries, which would equate to the discussion of salary ranges. But then also, because we have low salaries, then that brings up the conversation about the hiring range. And so I think the focus should still be the salary study and the salary ranges. If we can finalize salary ranges, then we can further the discussion into hiring ranges. I don't think we can really discuss. The data is our salary ranges are so old, and the data is so old that we can't even entertain hiring ranges at this point. We have to focus on salary ranges.
I think you mean the opposite, because from what I understood Russell to say, the hiring range actually creates more longevity. The salary range creates a cap that will become outdated more quickly, but a hiring range allows a little bit more of a life cycle for the data, the salary study ranges that were provided by HRS.
I will let Russell confirm that.
Thanks. And I see your hand, Councilor Bacon. Let's just see if we can get this question answered, and then I'll come over to you. Russell, did you understand what I was asking?
Yeah, I would agree that I think it's I think you have more flexibility with a hiring range, because you're going to have a lot of people towards the top of the range. If you're low now and you place people in it, you're going to have a lot of people at the top. And if the top is stuck and you can't go past the top, in 5 years from now, you're going to be underpaid. I mean, that's really what happens.
Right. And then, some of the concerns that were raised was, there's a fear of some sort that we wouldn't want to allow everybody that we hire to sort of if we're moving the entire salary range upward, we wouldn't want everybody that we hire to be at the top of this new range. And so part of it is the hiring, but then also I think that there is a desire for some sort of control or cap or limitation for there needs to be an endpoint. There needs to be something there that's going to I guess rein in the salary ranges at some point in time. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. Through the chair to Attorney Duperret, is that the right pronunciation?
That is. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for coming in, and I really appreciate your early comments. Back in 2018, I think, Councilor Lisi, you have my note on the top of that order.
I don't have the actual physical jacket, but
I had met with the mayor, asking him exactly the kinds of things that you're talking about tonight, and to give feedback back to the council, because the full council sent the study back to committee because the ranges were very, very broad. And there was the concern that you articulated and that Councilor Lisi also has articulated relative to out of control costs within the range that allowed full latitude to anything within the full range. So I'm very encouraged to hear your comments relative to hiring ranges rather than salary ranges. In the private sector where I work, they set salary ranges for a job, and as long as it's competitive in the market, then if somebody hits the cap of a job, they get a flat raise each year that does not go to the base. They will still get what you might refer to, or what we often refer to perhaps as a COLA, but it doesn't go to the base. So they're still getting more money, so the person isn't frozen in terms of gross earnings. And so I like that concept also, when we get to a place where we can't keep adding 2 or 3% to a job forever and ever and ever, because at a certain point the job will max out relative to the workforce, right? So I'm wondering if you think that kind of an approach could also be paired perhaps with a hiring range, and then some of those caveats put in to the limit of the movement to be bringing people up to scale. In the past, when there's been a real crunch in the workforce and we've had to recruit, we found we had to squeeze the scale so that on the one hand, we weren't paying the new people more than the dedicated, loyal employees, but on the other hand, we were able to recruit. So that to me was the most difficult part to balance. And I think that's pretty much the challenge that we have before us. And so I'm very happy to hear the approach you're bringing. It was what I was trying to get us to internally, but I think maybe after all these long years, we're getting there, because we, to your point, which I think you made very clearly and just briefly, was that we have to have controls as well as we have to have competitive pay. And so I really welcome that approach. Thank you.
Councilor Lisi?
Councilor Greeny.
Yes, just quickly, when we look at salary adjustments and salary scales, we also have to look beyond the salary schedule to the point of retirement of employees, because we have a retirement fund that needs to be furnished every year with additional costs. So you're going through any increase in any salaries, whether they be cost of living or whatever adjustments, there are also going to be costs that are going to be effective for a long time in the future for retirement costs. And all these things have to be taken into consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to just reiterate that what we're looking at here in terms of Schedule A is all the non-union employees, of which there is between 35 and 40. So there's only 35 or 40 employees that have not seen substantive, pay raises or even, meaningful adjustments made to their salary schedules. Whereas all of the unions have seen adjustments to their schedules as well as their benefits. Schedule B is the elected officials, and those I don't believe have been adjusted in 20 years or so. And then there's the contract employees and miscellaneous. And so those are the three schedules that we're looking at, and the salary range, or if we want to interpret it as a hiring range, we would need to do so in some explicit manner, but that range that we're looking at would only be applied to those non-union 30 or 40 non-union employees in Schedule A. Are there questions, other questions from committee members?
Councilor Lisi?
Councilor Bacon.
So the other thing that we need to understand is the cost of this. I mean, we all know we just sat there and passed the highest tax rates for commercial in the state. And we also passed more than palatable to a number of homeowners, an increase in the home real estate rates. And so we have to remember the context that we're in when we're making this adjustment. Mm-hmm. And the other point that I heard our outside attorney make was the idea of stepped improvements. But I will say this for the record, I will not support any increases for elected officials as part of this salary adjustment package. We are the people that are supposed to be sitting here being good stewards of the citizens' money. And from where I sit, we have a budget that is not sustainable by the citizens of this city. And so I hope the committee is going to be open to dealing with the employees and taking out B and C from this discussion, because I just think it's a non-starter in the context that we're sitting in. But that's my perspective on it. And I was working to try to look at the library scale. They're embedded within this 35 to 40 person salary scale. There are definitely people that want to move, that need to move in some of these salary ranges, but the leaders in those regards wanted to stay within this group at the time to move forward. So here we are, but we are in a very tough economic time here in the city. So we've got to try to balance these things while we're also looking at setting aside what small amounts of money we have out of a goal to build a school. So, I mean, we've got multiple priorities and we have to approach this incrementally. But I think some of the things we just need to leave off the table out of the interest of the employees of the city. Thank you.
Thanks. I just want to remind folks that in the 2% COLA projections that Hector completed, if we brought all those employees that were not presently at the floor of the new range, that would be a total cost of $230,000. And so I hear Councilor Vacan making an appeal to, do a percent cap for incrementally bringing some of those employees up to a percentage of their floor. I will give deference to Councilor McGivern, and then I saw, Russell, you had your hand up as well. So I'll come back to you in a minute.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. Just a couple of thoughts on the 30 or 40 employees that you're talking about. I think it's close to 17 are on that library schedule, which we can kind of separate from the discussion. I mean, that what they get paid is sinful. And I think it's something that can be adjusted with whatever we want to do in terms of salary ranges. It works within the library budget itself and nowhere else. So if you take the remainder, which I think is 20 something, let's go forward. There are people on this list that have not had a raise in over 10 years because they've hit max and we can't do the COLA. And there is no reason on earth why we cannot do the COLA from a budget point of view on an annual basis. I mean, most people are just looking at that. That's all they're asking for. I mean, we commissioned a study, was it 5 years ago now, 6 years ago now? And we're sitting here talking about 22 employees that are some of the most important positions in this city who deserve a cost of living increase on a reasonably, maybe not annual, but reasonably on every year possible that we can do it. I mean, I don't get it. Let's do something for the people that we care for. Now, on the elected officials, it's separated. It's a different vote. Councilor Vacan makes some good points. I think we have to treat elected officials, and we've always treated elected officials different. But let's not forget, there's 3 full-time salaried elected officials sitting on that list. One of them being the city clerk, and that thing has not been adjusted since Sue Egan was city clerk. We need to look at this. We need to look. I don't know if we're going to have a treasurer after this term is up. We may be switching and looking at, combining the tax collector, treasurer, and the different financial officers. So yes, we can separate that. And I think it's, it's time for the next term that we look at and it will always be for the next term, what the mayor's salary is. So let's not just throw it out with the bathwater, because these 3 people, and I'm not talking about our salaries, I'm not talking about the school committee, I'm talking about the 3 full-time people. It's time to look to the future, not adjust them currently, but look to adjust them in upcoming terms. But for those 22 people, we've got to act. It's just not right. We have not looked at their cost of living, especially the ones that have hit max already.
Thank you. Russell, did you want to respond to any of the comments that you heard? I saw your hand up a bit earlier.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is, so let's say that it's $200,000 if you did everything, if that's the actual number when we get down to it. So if the board decides that's just too much, we can't do that, you come up with a number that you think you can live with, So we basically work backwards and figure out what is reasonable. And a lot of times with these salary studies, you'll do it over 2 or 3 years. So you might not do 200,000 in 1 year, but you might be able to do some of it in the first year, some in the second year, and finish it in the third year. But if you can come up with a plan that looks reasonable from a budgetary perspective, working backward from the $200,000 number, that is typically how I would do it, to come to some reasonable compromise. That's what I would do with a union if a union was involved.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks. A question for the chair. Who was it exactly that did this study?
Her name is Sandy, and I don't remember her last name, but she works for HRS, which is Human Resource, sorry, I have to pick it up here.
Human Resources Services.
Thank you, Human Resources Services, and it,
So I'm just puzzled on the elected official ones. I totally agree with Councillor Vacan, but for other reasons, I cannot understand for the life of me, especially if we pay for this survey, why only 4 neighboring cities were included in this. Why Brockton was included, of all places. West Springfield omitted, East Hampton omitted, Ludlow, Amherst, Pittsfield, and Greenfield. All right. To me, this is just rubbish.
No. We had, there were, I believe, 15 communities that we were compared to.
Well, the schedule that was sent to me only has 5 listed.
Correct, and that may be correct, Councillor Lisi. He may be referring to just a snapshot of what we were working on with regard to the elected officials, and those communities were communities that we extracted from the actual salary study. So unfortunately, we do not have the resources to pull all of the information that the salary study provided to us all of these years ago. And so we referred to the salary study, and we extracted a couple of surrounding communities, and then we included some that were a bit out east with regard to the elected positions and the reserve officers. But in terms of the salary study that was actually conducted, it included and incorporated multiple communities across the state of Massachusetts.
So, Councillor Sullivan, you may be looking at the spreadsheets that Hector created for the electeds and the reserve officers alone. And because he was doing that work, he just took 5 or 6 communities from the original. I just looked at the HRS study, and there were 16 communities. Some were based on geographic location, so people that were in the valley, communities that were in the valley here with us, and then other communities that were comparable, like Lawrence, Brockton, Fall River, that have similar demographics and that are more of a city than a town, because most of the neighboring communities out here do function a bit more like a town than a city. So I can make sure that you have that original study to reference.
Okay, because that's all we're being shown to look at, and based on that, I certainly wouldn't be in favor of it. It'd be a tough sell for me anyways. That's my only question for right now.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So a few things. I mean, I also in line. It's not that I would be opposed to an adjustment for the elected officials, and I would also emphasize that I think we are going to have a treasurer, because I recall the mayor saying we will not do a charter change in 2021 when we did not do the recall. So therefore, we won't have a charter change, so the treasurer will still be around for the election. So let's make that pretty clear. But I also think that, we should be in a situation, and we need to be in a situation where they might be elected at a certain salary, but there would be some planned adjustment as we go along. And I don't think it necessarily, I don't believe elected officials really should ever get or will ever get what they might truly deserve, because they are in a position, you look at the President of the United States, the office of President of the United States. I mean, obviously, the person, whoever it might be, it's a full-time job, and I'm not exactly sure what they're getting now, but last I remember it was something like $400,000. Well, someone working on some corporation is making $40 million. So I mean, you can't base it on the importance of the job, because it is, as our founding fathers talked about, an avocation rather than a vocation. But I do think we should consider making some adjustments. But I'm looking, and before I forget, Hector, I also wanted you to give me a 1.5% COLA. I didn't see that. Maybe it's there, but I've been trying to look through, and I'm not great at computer stuff. So if it's there, I don't see it. But I looked at the library, and I started going through the library people, and I stopped at the custodian. And the adjustment, the custodian is making $27,350. So assuming they're working a full-time job, and at 2%, that person would get a $35 adjustment, which, that's a person, and I'm assuming if I add that up, that's probably less than $15 an hour. I would have to assume, based on a full-time $15 an hour, and assuming that 32,000, 20,000, not going to make it. So I look at some of these, and I agree with Councilor McGivern. We need to make some adjustments. I also, I like what Attorney Duperre, is that what she said? Okay, we're rocking, huh? I also like the idea of trying to set up something with a little more control. But the other thing, and maybe I'm totally off the wall here, if we always have to make an amendment to an ordinance in order to get somebody raises, as opposed to creating a salary structure and then potentially doing it, if we're not in the union, doing it through the budget process, where at least the council has its say, but recommendations can come forward every year as to, and also that would be based on what we can afford. Because the other factor here is that Holyoke is one of the poorest communities. We have, we're trying to get ourselves out of that situation, but if you look at all the communities around here, we're certainly not the most affluent. And I know we try to compare with other communities, but one of the factors in any business and running the city as a business is to also recognize what we can afford. So and again, if it's at all, I kind of look, one of the other things I would like to know and would like to see, I wonder how many employees, and I would also, I'm going to thank Alicia Zeller, because I think she made some valid points with this question. Is there anything else you believe would be valuable to share, please? And this is her comments, and I think she's right on a lot of these. High turnover is likely attributable to factors other than compensation, such as departmental policies, leadership and management, employee morale, and work environment. The compensation study is probably outdated at this point. It will need updating. The city would benefit from an employee survey and a commitment to improving identified workplace deficiencies to slow employee departures and attract professional, well-qualified staff. And she also suggested that we should compare where we are now and where we were in her 20 plus years, where the workforce was more stable, collaborative, efficient, and effective. I think there are certain parts of the city that is very collaborative and stable, but I think there's a lot of this that is not been brought into the team, and I think that has created, and I won't mention any names, but I know several people who felt like they were not part of the team They didn't leave because of salary. They left because of other factors. So there's a lot of things involved. Certainly salary does play a role. But I do think, those comments, as I read those, kind of struck me as I talked to city employees, both current and previous, in terms of what we can do. But again, also, I'm looking at that custodian, and I went into the custodian in city buildings, and I know they're unionized, but the pay was like, if I'm not mistaken, it was like $10,000 more. So, I mean, those are the kind of things we can't let happen. We shouldn't let happen. But how we actually get there, I'm not exactly sure. But I just think, and I would ask again, Hector, if you wouldn't mind, because I kind of agree with the attorney that, we may need to do this. We go half of it this year. We go another 25% next year. We go another 25% the year after. And then maybe we give them that 5% that fourth year down. And we catch up while we are still living within our financial means, but also making sure our employees are getting a significant improvement in their economic payment. Thank you.
I see Councilor McGivern, and then Russell, I think there's a couple of questions coming your way again.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. I just want to add one thing, and I think a lot of good things have been said, a lot of good discussion, but I realize and affordability will always be part of this discussion, but affordability comes when we start looking at financial transfers and budgetary talks. And yes, we have to understand that will be part of our discussion. But when we talk about affordability, we also have to recognize that, even as a less than affluent community, we've become a training ground for some of our most professional positions. How many people can we hire, train them, work for 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years, and then move on? And how many department heads have we lost to the city of Springfield? Think about that. Mm-hmm. Springfield is not any less affluent than what the city of Holyoke is when it comes to the medium wage. And yet we're training people and they're going to Springfield for higher wages. And I'm going to stop there and let everybody think about that because, it costs money to train people. It costs money to hire people in professional positions, then to allow them because of salary, leave for other communities is just going to hurt us in the pocketbook as much as if we don't pay them a fair wage.
Was that somebody trying to speak? I'm sorry. Hector, I know you had your hand up also.
Yes, I did. I agree with, I think both Councilor Bacon and Councilor Murphy and Councilor McGivern all have very good points that will likely have to be addressed, in response to some of those concerns, from a business perspective, every year, it's just the cost of doing business. There's always going to be a large scale of competing priorities. And so my defense for pushing the salary study forward is that this, priority, I don't know when discussions began, but, the salary was conducted between 2014 and 2015, and we're pushing 6 years later. And within those 6 years, other priorities have obviously needed to be addressed. So I just don't see that our employees who serve the city and our residents, how many more years until we can make this study a priority, finalize it, and put it behind us, and focus on other objectives going forward. And I'm 100%. I certainly understand. The competing priorities and the financial circumstances that the city is in. But realistically, when I've spoken with employees or other counselors or, members of just our workforce, the conversation as to why this has not been pushed forward always really comes down to financials. which is understandable, but we have to make some sort of movement with this, and the financial constraints cannot be, our excuse annually, because it's been pushing 6 years now. If we continue forward with that same dialogue, then it's going to be 10 years and 12 years and 15 years later before this actually gets addressed. So I definitely reason with the concern for financial constraints and competing priorities, but I think this has been, it's clear, we have a date stamp on it. It's been a priority for the city for over 5 years now, and I think it's well overdue to put it on the table for it to be addressed and have some heavy attention. With regard, in response to Councilor Murphy, with Alicia Zoller's comments, I agree with her 100% as well. Compliance or employee morale, certainly a huge factor internally, but we have not been able to sustain people responsible for those responsibilities in terms of those positions, whether it be the law department or the personnel office or whomever. We just have not been able to retain those positions to really secure a solid foundation that would essentially make those concerns obsolete. So compensation is not the number one reason why employees leave their workforce or their employer. It definitely is a high item, but it's not the number one. But Holyoke is very unique with the sense that everything that we have to face and the challenges that are existing right now internally have to do with these positions in question, some of these positions in question, but retaining these employees who have a heavy hand, who have served the city for a long time, who have the institutional knowledge, and when people leave, they take that with them, and so that's where things start to crumble internally. So that's just a little bit of what I wanted to respond to with that, and thank you.
Thank you. So the question that I have.
Lisi?
Who is this? Yes.
Councilor Lisi, I just wanted to let you know I'm in by phone because I'm having
Councilor Bacon.
trouble. Just to let you know.
It's Councilor Bacon. I'll change your name so that we know that it's you down there. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Russell, one of the questions that I wanted to ask was related to the points that Councilor Murphy made up around like a formula for electeds. Have you seen anything like that? I know you're not usually working with elected officials in their salaries, but have you seen anything that would allow like automatic sort of updates to happen at a percentage? Or, I mean, I guess the question is just that. Have you seen formulas that get triggered after a certain number of years?
I haven't seen that, but it doesn't mean you couldn't try to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, typically elected officials, like the mayor position, raises don't happen very frequently with elected positions. So it's the reason mayors typically make less than a number of other positions in the city, which seems odd, but it's true in many, many places. Mm-hmm. Because they just aren't increased very often without a vote of the council.
Right. And then I see, Councilor Murphy, your hand is up. I'll let you speak, and then I think I want to do a recap just to say I'd be willing to work with Hector, Crystal, and Russell in sort of like a mini working group offline here to, I'll just say what I think we need to do is look at the salary range that was provided by HRS as a hiring range and somehow make that explicit so that it gives us a bit more longevity and flexibility moving forward. Figuring out how to control, so with a policy, how to control placement within the new ranges upon hiring. Number 3 would be figuring out our budget, or, so if we took, a percentage, so if those people that are not at the floor of the new range, if we wanted to say we want to make, everybody at least 75% of the range, what that price tag would be compared to the $230,000 that it would cost to bring everybody up to the new floor. And then finally, I think we need to add to the ordinance something that says, COLAs can be applied to increase pay, but not the base rate of pay, to Councilor Bacon's point earlier. So I think those are the few things that I would want to work on and prepare for our next meeting. And I'll leave it at that and go to Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. So again, just a couple of other thoughts, and I appreciate Hector your thoughts, and a few things, and I agree. I mean, obviously, pay does have a factor, but there are a lot of factors. And having worked at Holyoke Community College and seeing a great morale, and then a morale going down, and then coming back, and then going back down, it makes a tremendous difference when that happens. And a lot of that is in terms of input and things along that lines. But a couple of other questions. And one of the things that a business would do, and I think the city needs to do, is, can we get by with less people in certain offices and be in a position to pay the people that are staying more? So in fact, let's just say we had 8 employees, and we had, the lowest one was 50,000. Just throw that out there, and we could get by. We found out we could go with 7 employees, which then provides the city a saving, but also provides the ability to offer additional pay to those people staying and doing the additional work. I mean, I think we need to, I would suggest that we shouldn't just assume we need to replace all the positions, or that where we are is where we should be, and take a look at, can we do the job effectively in line with what Councilor McGivern said, make sure we're maintaining the best people we have, but in some cases asking them to accept a little more responsibility in order for us to pay them what they might consider a more effective pay scale. So I that's one thing I would certainly like to consider, something that we should be looking at every year. When we're looking, why are we having 8 employees and last year we had 7? Why are, or on the other hand, why are we having 6 when we had 7? And are we going to provide some incentive for those people doing the additional work? I mean, I think there are ways to do this where you are providing a better livelihood, an efficient and effective workforce that can get the job done, and recognize that they're being trusted to get the job done. And because of that, we're going to not hire as many people, but we want to pay you more. So that's one thing. And then again, as I keep looking at the chart, and the ones in yellow, Hector, are the ones that would be getting an adjustment, right? Am I right in that? Hector, the ones that are on your chart in yellow, those are all the ones that would be getting adjustments?
Those are the ones that are currently under the recommended minimum, I believe.
Okay. So, I mean, I do look at some of them, especially on the lower end of the scale. I mean, that library custodian has got to be included in that, and that's got to be a change, because that's hard work, and it's not something that people get a lot of personal reward for that. But again, if we can do those and make the first adjustment, and the other question goes back to what we talked about last time, because I know I was saying, hoping we would have free cash, that we might be in a position to make some of these adjustments for the rest of this fiscal year. Now, after the budget hearing last week, I'm assuming we're probably talking, these are FY22s.
Yeah.
So, but again, you know, all those kind of things play a role, and I do think, you know, having fewer people sometimes builds a better team because everybody has to cooperate more together. And then again, if you're paying them better, they're obviously happy about that as well. They're accepting additional responsibility and accepting additional pay. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Councillor McGivern and then Councillor Sullivan.
Muted, Joe, muted.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. On item number 7, I could just make a few suggestions to the committee. This is the reserve officers in the police department. You know, I think we've made the arguments. I think we all understand that our reserve officers are essentially, you know, full-time police officers that are waiting to be taken off the civil service list and filling in vacancies within the permanent positions themselves. However, while they're waiting, they are called upon to work on a per diem basis and work, you know, for doing the same jobs as a police officer who stands next to them out in the line of fire, so to speak. And I suggest that the current salary of, I believe it's $14.95, is way too low to ask someone to put a gun on and to go out into the streets and to perform those duties. If we were to wait, you know, look at raising that wage in increments, we could do something for the remainder 6 months of this year, possibly without adjusting the budget itself, because we're not, look, you know, they're pay as you go, and it's one line item. And then suggest that in July 1st of next year, with the budget coming up by then, you know, the new budget, that we will be able to make a second adjustment. So I was just wondering if the committee would consider going up $3 per hour immediately, and then an additional 2 hours on July 1st.
I'd be fine with that. I wouldn't even mind going higher, Joe.
Right.
Well, I'm trying to go for what we can do.
Yep.
I mean, I think the argument is clear.
I don't see, I thought you did provide us with some data for the reserve officers to just help us justify the rate.
Yeah. So there should be a spreadsheet that is titled elected wage info, and
it's in that one. Okay.
Yes, yes. They're on the same spreadsheet because it was, you know, just part of, I didn't want there to be 4 and 5 different ones being circulated. So all of the elected officials, which are Schedule B, and then one position from Schedule C, which is the miscellaneous schedule, is the reserve officers, which since our original discussion, we have just, you know, made a focus on the reserve officers from Schedule C. So that's why they are included on this. So column N and O.
I see it. Yep.
You know, N is the position reserve officers, and column O is the hourly rate for the communities that did respond. Agawam does not have reserve officers. They have special police officers. They do compensate them at $59.98 per hour. And just a very brief background regarding that. Special police officers, depending on the community, are often retired police officers. And there are, ordinances or MGLs that govern how these officers are paid. So in Holyoke, off the top of my mind, I think they would have a special police officer would have to be compensated at the rate of the position that they retired from. So we have reserve officers, and our folks are often people who are looking to become an official police officer and go through the processes that are established in order to occupy that role. And Holyoke often will promote our reserve officers into those capacities when eligible.
I think their special officer sounds a little bit more like our auxiliary police.
It's our auxiliary police. They are not compensated, and they fall under a different. still under the police department, but under the auxiliary umbrella. So it's a little different, and a lot of each community, not everyone is the same, and so that's why it's a little complicated. But so that's the background on Agawam. Chicopee, they compensate their reserves at $15 an hour. It's a cent more than what Holyoke pays. And we received a response from Westfield, and they compensate their reserve officers at $18 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Counselor Lisi?
Counselor Bacon.
Thank you. Can I ask what our full-time officers start at?
I believe from the last meeting, we heard it was $25 an hour, or
Okay.
a salary that is comparable to $25 an hour.
Okay, thank you.
I
would like to. No,
go ahead. We do have Counselor Sullivan in queue, so if you don't mind, I'd like to hear what he has to say before you motion.
Okay.
Thank you. Counselor Sullivan.
Well, I wanted to go back to the salary study.
Yeah, please do. Yep, and then we could pick this up afterwards.
So my question is for you, Hector. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. How long have you been with the city now?
About 2.5 years.
Okay. So we had a discussion earlier about compensation and people leaving and going to other cities. Are you leaving?
I will be leaving. That is correct.
When?
I do not have a date, and I do not think that I need to provide that on this conference call.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'm just wondering because I'm seeing that the job is posted on December 10th.
That is correct.
Okay. So, I mean, right now you're just not comfortable with have you been offered a better job somewhere? Or is this, relevant to the conversation we're having right now regarding the pay?
I can speak on certain things. I think prefer to have my personal life excluded from this conversation because I don't think that it serves a purpose here.
Yep.
But yes, I do have opportunities that I am exploring. I think what would serve more of a purpose is there was a municipality that reached out to me last year in Massachusetts for my, to basically just make a lateral transition into a new community. This was in 2019. I did decline. However, when, to make this conversation with purpose, the salary differential had the potential to make $20,000 more occupying the position that I have with Holyoke in a different community. So I am not leaving for another municipality, but for the record, there are positions that are also part of the positions that we were speaking on tonight that are just higher paying roles in other communities. And so actually that's just for my last speaking point. I know for Holyoke, personally, from my opinion, I think there are two challenges that we are facing. One of which is we have a lot of tenured employees who have not received increases. So that's one thing to focus on. And then also not necessarily focusing on the person who occupies the role, but focusing on the role itself, the position. So we have positions that are on our spreadsheets that are not comparable with surrounding communities. And so when we look at salary data, we're not comparing, what Hector makes today versus the HR director in, another community. We're comparing what the HR director in Holyoke, the salary range that's available in comparison to what another HR director in another community could have the potential to make as well. So those are two different objectives that I think we should focus on. But I think the primary focus is addressing our current employees who have been with Holyoke for who are dedicated, but also when we talk about attraction and retention, we have to focus on the salary range itself, not the person who occupies the role. Just hopefully that's clear, and that's all I have to say, unless you have anything further, Councilor Sullivan.
Very clear, and I thank you for your forthrightness.
Thank you for your service, Hector.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to also note that we had a conversation with Sandy Strapinski from HRS Services that talked a little bit about also I think it's important to note that the HR director in Holyoke may not be doing the exact same work that the HR director in Westfield or Springfield or any other community is doing. And so part of the work that HRS did in their large analysis was to say they did qualitative interviews to find out what work individual positions were doing. And then they sort of created the salary schedule based on the workload and responsibilities and how comparable they were to other communities. So, it's not necessarily that every HR director or every assessor or every I don't know, any other position is doing the same work in every other community because of the way that each municipality is structured and organized. The same role may have different responsibilities, and so the salary study did take that into consideration. With that, I know Councilor Vacan wanted to motion.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to offer a motion to increase the hourly rate of the reserve officers by $3, taking Councilor McGivern's suggestion and looking at the scale, it would bring them pretty comparable to Westfield. So that's my motion. It would bring it from $14.95 to $17.95.
Could I amend that to make it around $18?
Oh, okay, sure.
Friendly amendment.
And Councilor, is your hand up on this? No, I'm assuming your hand up is not on this, Councilor Sullivan.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. I just want to make sure that you weren't here. So Councilor Murphy has made the motion to amend the reserve officer salary to $18.
Well, I accepted the amendment. So I've amended my motion for it to be $18.
Yeah, and I'm seconding her motion.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to amend to $18. And I see Councilor McGivern, your hand is up here.
Real quick, thank you. I appreciate the motion and certainly support it. If you could just consider, and only because it's easier to do it before the budget talks, is that additional $2 come July 1st.
And I'll make a friendly amendment that
can we take them separately, please?
Sure. So wait, just Councilor McGivern, what you're motioning is, or what you're saying is that you want it as one motion, that we do $3 today and then effective July 1st, the other $2?
Correct. And the reason being is, if you look at the starting wage is $25 an hour, that'll be a patrol officer who will be full-time, which will equal to I think around $45,000. Now, the reserve officers are not going to get a full salary, a full annual salary, but the comparable, per diem rate, should reflect something that gets them closer to that $25 an hour is all I'm suggesting. And the fact that they are doing the same thing that the patrol officer, new patrol officer, and, the experienced and all the patrol officers are doing. And I appreciate the talks about Agawam, but Agawam is a totally different story. You look at a patrol officer who is Group 4. If they start at a young age and work 30 years, they can retire with 80% of their salary. And in Agawam, they bring them back and pay them to supplement their force, but they pay them, what they made when they went out. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking to pay people who are trying to get into the ranks, something that is not at the starting wage, but something per diem that is closer to the starting wage. But I understand, the first thing, certainly the $3 increase I support, If we need separate votes, that's fine, but I just want to be prepared for July 1.
Thank you. I do want to just note, Hector and Russell, I think we have rounded out the conversation that we're going to have this evening on the salary schedule, and now we're focused on the reserve officers. So I will reach back out to you to see if we can have a little working group meeting on the 5 items that I outlined earlier. So if you want to take off, I know, you know, you want to get home and things like that. So thank you for your time this evening. And if any counselors want to either participate, I think there's room for one other counselor to participate, or you can always send questions over to me and I'll bring them to that working group meeting.
All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Hector.
When the working group is done with its work, I can always come back to a full meeting too later.
Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. You've been very, very helpful this evening, Russell. Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Have a happy holiday.
Good night. Nice to meet you.
Happy
Good night.
holidays.
Thank you. So, okay, on the motion by Councilor Bacon to increase the reserve officer pay by $3.05 to bring it to around $18 an hour, seconded by Councilor Murphy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I believe everybody's here, so that's a 5-0 vote. And then if anybody wants to make the second motion, or if you want to hold off for another time, it's up to you.
You know, if you were talking, bringing it to 20, is that what we're talking?
The remaining $2 for fiscal year 22.
I mean, I'm okay to do that now, or if I would not be objecting if we try to, on April 1st, create a new ordinance effective July 1st. I mean, whichever way, I'm comfortable either way.
Sure. And then Councilor McIverin, maybe you would just, so I understand you want us to be prepared for, you know, July and fiscal year 22, but what's the goal in waiting or staggering? Like, why is April? Is it because of the changes to the budget or sense of revenues? What's the motivation there?
Just so that the chief of police and the mayor can prepare for how much money to put in the budget before they give us their proposed budget for the next fiscal year. It's only a thought. It's easier to do because it's a one-line item in the budget, so you can do it anytime. But I just thought they should know as they're planning the budget what we're looking at.
And if I could just make one other point about, I just looked at the budget. I just did a quick calculation, and our average pay for patrolmen is $62,000 a year, which, assuming they work a 40-hour week, ended up being close to $30 an hour. So, I mean, obviously there are some that are getting more and some that are just starting and not getting as much, but that's the average. It's about $30 an hour.
I would hope that by the time April rolls around, we would have a few more data points. So I think let's say that this order has been approved at the $18 mark, and then if we want to file another order in preparation for 21, we could get the rest of those data points to round out where exactly, and perhaps even ask the department for some more data about, you know, like what's the median compared to the average rate of pay, because depending on how many entry-level patrolmen versus, you know, tenured patrolmen we have, it may affect what the median or, you know, average is. Okay, so I'm going to expect a second order then at this point in time. And that is okay with the makers?
Yep.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, so item number 7 has been acted on, and then it seems like we would want to keep on the table items 4 through 6.
Motion to table.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to table items 4 through 6. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. That is our entire agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Motion to
Coun-
adjourn has been made and
Wait,
seconded.
Councilor Lisi?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't even see you there. Councilor Leahy.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it known that I was here at the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do see you now.
Councilor Lisi.
Councilor Graney.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa to everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, enjoy.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Merry
On the
Christmas,
motion
happy,
to adjourn. All in favor?
happier New Year
Aye.
to all.
Aye. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys. Happy.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See
Happy
you next
holidays.
year.
See you next week.
Bye.
So long.